Right, thank you very much for joining. We are going to be talking about pursuit strategies to win bigger deals. This is me, by the way, looking into the camera, and this will be me just looking at my screen, kind of reading out and making the points, by the way. Just in case you're wondering where are the others on the call from yesterday, I just found it's a little bit more pragmatic for you to re-watch this without the distraction of other people kind of getting involved. Okay, so particularly for Adam, excuse me, and a couple of the others that have asked for recording of this. So here it goes. It's slightly separate one, but I'm going to go through. I'm not going to major on the unimportant slides. I'm just going to sort of burn through this, if you like, and I'll send you invites for a bigger one for the one next week also, which is going to be on negotiate and close. Right, so hopefully on your screens now you'll be able to see the pursuit strategies for bigger deals kind of main thing, and you can see exactly what this is all about, which we're not chasing, we are pursuing very different bigger deals. And as we learned from yesterday, that can have different things for different people. I'm not going to go through the recap of the week before because that's not really relevant for this particular thing. But this is where we are in the business-to-business sales process. We started off with the ability to tell your story. And for those of you in the UK and Birmingham, I'm going to be doing this on the 1st of September for the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce, where we'll be talking about how to tell your story in 60 seconds. There's real art that can be done. So on previous weeks, I've run through go-to-market, lead generation, qualifying deals, what we did last week, and pursuit strategy, what we're talking about today. Next week, we're going to talk about negotiate and close, yada, yada. Okay, brilliant. That's where we are. Okay, so what is a pursuit strategy? Really, it's about the resources that you're going to need as an organization to pursue a particular deal, what stakeholders you're going to need, what resources you're going to need in order to win, because there's only one real reason, apart from one mischievous reason, but there's only one real reason you're going to pursue a particular deal, is because you want to win it. A disclaimer, of course, is that you can't manage your business running a process like this for every single deal, unless it crosses a particular threshold of financial value or some sort of risk sort of matrix that you might operate within your company. Probably 85% of your business, in terms of number of transactions or in terms of revenue, needs to be business as usual, stuff that you can do without special process. Okay, so I'm going to assume that's the case, in which case we're into perhaps one deal in 6, which requires a bit more thinking about to decide if we're going to pursue it. So this is, first of all, there's a gating process. Are we going to pursue? And if we are, what we're going to do about that, how are we going to run that process? Okay, brilliant. So, all right, so what questions you're going to ask you're going to need to get the answers to before deciding whether to move this forward. First of all, is this a deal that you want to win? And you'll need to get your account manager, the key people involved in the day-to-day running of this account, or if it's you, if that person is you, you're going to need to sort of understand, is this opportunity worth winning? And that needs to go beyond the intuition of, yeah, of course I want to win it. And if you're the salesperson, you're going to get paid a significant sum of money for closing that deal. Of course you want to win it. But unfortunately, business is not always that clear cut, not always that simple. We have to bring other people with us on that journey. Okay, effort required, of course, but it's worth spending half a day or so collectively, maximum half a day really, otherwise you haven't got clarity on the deal. Right, so what's next? So when is it needed? Depending on what size company you're in, if it's a deal over 100k or so, if you're an SME, less than, let's say, 100 people, if it's a deal over 100k, then that may break or enter into your particular process, but it might be $500,000. It just depends on what size company you are. If you're a less than 9 people, then your limit might be 10 to 20,000. It doesn't really matter. It's about your company. It's not about vanity or anything else. It's about your operating context. Okay, right. So, and it is all relative. Okay. And it could also be a strategic deal. So, and that's the important differentiator. A strategic deal, not necessarily a big deal. It is strategic in nature. So it could be a big deal, of course, in the same sector, or it also could be a smaller deal, but in a very different sector that you haven't dealt with before. So perhaps you're used to selling into the public sector or central government. Or municipal governments, and you're going to take your services to financial services because they behave in a similar way and you believe you can deliver value there. The very fact that you're now going into a separate market, that adds some risk. It's an unknown, uncharted waters for your company in some way. And you have to ask a question about why. Why this deal? Why do we deserve to get this deal? And not our competition. And that can be a very sobering conversation to have. All right, so what's next? So, bragging rights. So may not even be about the size of the deal or the sector. It might be, gosh, this is such a fantastic brand to have on board, and I'm not going to reference any brands, but you know who I'm talking about, that this is over and above a business as usual deal. We call it bragging rights in sales, but you can call it whatever you want, but it's something that really adds value to your brand, also to be associated with that customer brand. That's really, really important. And the other thing is, if I've missed anything out, as a catch-all, the A to Z option, if you like, is it just, if you feel for some reason that your company needs this process, and you should be able to articulate in a simple sentence why this process is needed, because you're going to need people's time and people's support to take it forward. Okay, what's next? The assumptions are you've already qualified the deal. You've already spoken at length with the customer. You've already said, yes, we want that's their need. We're going to sell them this, and that meets the need, and we can do that all day long, or we want to be able to deliver it on this occasion for this customer. So that's, you've already qualified the deal and it's winnable. You actually want to win it, of course, and you know why you're going to win it, the win themes. So you'll need the support of, in terms of deals like this, it's never about just you. And if you're a sales professional, if you're the account manager, and some companies don't actually have a formal sales function, the founders of the company, the directors of the company, if it's a smaller company, they'll just take responsibility for major clients, and they do many other things over and above just sales. But notwithstanding, your role in this particular pursuit might be as the orchestra conductor. So you might be sitting there as a director of the company, and you've got control or influence over vast resources at your disposal, but actually you're going to be the orchestra conductor. You're going to be coming in, you're going to be talking to the strings, which might be your sales department or your project managers, and bring in the brass section, and that might be your subject matter experts. And you to be able to conduct that orchestra and create a symphony, I'm kind of thinking on the fly here, that's important. So the important thing is, it's not just you, it's about bringing the company with you. If it is just you, then that's really high risk. And if I was a client company, I probably wouldn't do a major deal for my company on account of just having seen one person from that company. I won't be wanting to kind of get under the skin of any partner company. And I've, in fact, in my long career in sales, I have lost one or two quite major deals on the basis that they wanted to work with me, but because I think I'm a good guy to work with, but they weren't convinced that the rest of my company was with me. And certainly on one occasion, they were absolutely right. Okay, right. So you'll need the support. If you have a line manager, If you don't have a line manager because you're very senior or so, you probably have stakeholders, shareholders that you kind of have responsibility for as well. You'll need their support. The client, of course, don't lose sight of the client. And I say that not glibly, because it's very easy to get buried under your own internal processes and forget, you lose sight of actually who are we doing this for, who's going to benefit, whose business are we going to transform as a result of engaging with us is the client. So you must have the support of the client, maybe not all of the client, but a bit of the client, and the client's business ecosystem as well. So any partners that are lurking around in the ecosystem that you can get valuable account intelligence from, you'll need those people on board as well. And of course, an executive sponsor. So if you're a sales professional, if you're an individual contributor, let's say, you might need the support of your country manager, even if it's a really, really material deal, or maybe your line manager is sufficient for just a regular pursuit-driven deal. Okay. We also, and this is a rather sobering question, but an important one nonetheless, is what happens if you lose? Because there's only one thing that, there's now as hard to predict as the future. You cannot guarantee to win particular deals, but there is a methodology to really maximize your chances of winning. But for the small percentage of chance that you're going to lose, you do have to ask that question, what happens if we lose? Okay, brilliant. So moving on to the next bit, which is the Zeeman pyramid. So if you don't do anything, if you just pursue a deal without having these thoughts, strategic thoughts, you are only going to be in the maybe suitable category. So I'm here, I've got my buyer's hat on, and we're going to be talking about you as a vendor, as a supplier, wanting to do business with us. And you are going to be in one of three categories: maybe suitable, differentiated, i.e. you've done something actively to differentiate your offer from the pack, which makes it more helpful for me as the buyer to articulate your difference. Or you may even be preferred. You've got difference and you've got the preferred services and all the rest that goes with it. I'm not going to go into that, but this is the thought process that your buyers are going to be going through in some way, shape or form. Okay, so you are going to need to ask some high gain questions as a result of that. And these may sound obvious, but your goal is you have to answer these questions. You have to answer these questions in sentences of 20 words or less, and you've got to be able to articulate it succinctly. Okay, so what specifically are you going to win? What service are you going to be providing? What are you going to win? What's the financial value of the deal that you're going to be winning? Now, you may not be able to get to a one answer line item for the value. It might be a range of values depending on what services the customer decides to take from you. It could be between that as a minimum and that as a maximum, but so you're going to need to articulate that for others that are involved in doing the deal. Okay, right, what else is next? What specifically do you need to believe to win? Now, this is a little bit esoteric, but oftentimes when I've pursued very large deals, we don't actually have all the assets required to deliver the service. On one particular occasion, we had to go out and acquire another company to give us capability in terms of some specific software. So that was on the to-do list. It was a long pursuit. It was about 18 months long, but we had to acquire a company, several $1 million, but it had to be done, and therefore it was a strategic pursuit for us. You may not have to go to that trouble. It might be something a bit smaller, or it might be something bigger, but you've got all the resources available to you and in control of. So what do you need to believe to win? Next thing is, what do you need to do? What are the breaking down steps that you need to go through to win? That's important. You'll need to know the answers to that, or you'll need to know what answers to go and get. They're almost signposting kind of conversations. Who needs to say yes in terms of your stakeholder map, which includes your clients, by the way. Who needs to say yes? But often more importantly, and we call those sponsors, by the way, people that are sponsoring, supporting you. They may be supporting, by the way, your customer might also be supportive of another company, a competitor of yours, but broadly they're supportive of your approach. So you want all those people saying yes, and we call those sponsors. But also, who could say no? Now, there are lots of people in your client company that could say no, and you'll need to manage and work with those and influence them to get them in a position where they will say yes, or that they will not say no, and that's equally as important. And the next thing is your internal stakeholders, your line manager, your operations people, etc., who could say no, and you'll need to work with them extra hard in terms of getting them to yes, or understanding why they're going to say no, and then you stop the bid. If you've got a major stakeholder that is going to say no, they're going to block it, then you're going to have to stop the bid because you won't be correct. That's the facts of life. But you are in the influencing business, and you need to go influence those people. Okay, and we call those detractors, and to some extent they're even more important than supporters. Okay, right, time's marching on, so I'm going to press on. We'll need to understand the political power. Who is more important in the account, or who's more important internally? And by that, that's not always necessarily the most senior person. It could be somebody that's not so senior, but they're really influential in some way, shape, or form. They might be a subject matter expert around some technology. In particular, this happens with technology, or it might happen that they're an expert on regulation or something like that. So, but they're a detractor, and we will need to manage them, persuade, influence, all those things, or nullify their influence some way. But these are important considerations to go through. And of course, what after that? Again, what if we lose the deal? What happens then? How do I manage our professional exit from there? And what's going to be the impact on all the resources? So have you developed a bid budget, and you're going to be undermining your ability to get a return on that budget by going after a deal that you don't win? So that's rule over 18. Sometimes that's the deal. Okay, right. So you also, sorry, a bit of lag. So you're going to have an example org chart. This is an example. I've taken the client name out for obvious reasons, but this is a deal that I worked on a few years ago for an employer. This is a brief part of the map, a certain section of their organization. Obviously, CEO or group CEO was at the very, very top. But in order to win a particular deal, I had to work with technology, with finance, with HR. And I had to go through in quite some detail who's in that account that I need to talk to, who are in those silos, if you like, who's in those business units that I've got to talk to. And either I need a yes from, or not say no from. Who are they? And who in my organization is going to go and talk to them? Is it me? Is it one of my colleagues? Is it my line manager, etc., etc.? So you will need an org chart. To take you through that process, I am going to illustrate a couple of ridiculous. One's ridiculously simple, and another is ridiculously complex. And just to illustrate the kinds of questions that you're going to need to ask. Okay, right, so what happens next? Let's imagine that you're going into a coffee shop just now. 1 second. There we go. So we're imagining we're going into a coffee shop. Here's a cup of coffee, as one I did earlier. Lovely. And let's just say that we are going to ask the barista, let's say you're the barista, you're going to ask an open question. What would you like to order, sir, ma'am, whatever it happens to be? And okay, so we have to think to ourselves, okay, as a result of a customer that has a need, a very simple need on this occasion, but just to illustrate, what are we going to win? Well, we're going to win an Americano or a flat white or whatever it happens to be. I know this is very basic, but it's a really important concept. Is that core business for us? That's what we're asking. Is it core business? Whether it's a coffee, whether it's an HR transformation, is it core business for us? That's the first thing. What do we need to do to win? Well, if it's core business, we shouldn't actually need to do too much other than assign people to the change program or the coffee delivery program, as this in this particular example. Next thing is, who needs to say yes? Well, I need to say yes, that's called core business, and they need to say yes in terms of, yes, I want that product, that flat white, and yes, I'm prepared to pay that price. Now, if you're a barista, they kind of walk through the door, and so you're fairly certain that if you've got the product available, they are probably going to buy it, but it's still not a slam dunk, and I'll come to the reason for that in just a minute. Okay, right, so who could say no? And this is why we're coming to what we call certainty of completion. So just because you've got a client that's walked up that wants a product, in this instance, a flat white, what could go wrong with that order? Ordinarily, 99.9% of the time, that's going to go through. It's going to be £2.80 or whatever it happens to be, and it's going to go through. But there will be one, pick a percentage, but there's going to be a small percentage of occasions where you're going to make that flat white. You're going to go to some sunk, well, not really sunk costs, but they're already previously invested costs. Excuse me, and a number of things. Your payment systems might go down. The customer's card might not work. It might be damaged. They might have insufficient funds. All kinds of things can still go wrong, and that's really, really important. Now, on a coffee, £2.80, whatever it happens to be, no biggie. But if you've got a customer that wants 1,000 laptops next Thursday, then that's a very considerable cost. And even if you've been trading with them an awful long time, there's going to be some sort of risk management process to go, when are we going to release those products and all the rest of it. Now, we're back to our basic example here on the barista. We're probably okay for the minute. So what if after all that we lose? Well, we've just been through that scenario. We're not going to lose an awful lot on a coffee, no biggie. So let's go to something altogether the other end of the scale. And apologies if you're not a football fan, but it is a current topic of conversation in the sports world and in the business world as well. And since we're in business, I thought it was relevant. So European Super League, other end, we're not talking about coffee, we're talking about something much more complex and something actually that people generally get more passionate about. And passion can be both negative and positive. They get more passionate about sports and soccer in particular, as we're in the UK as the national sport. So let's ask that open question again. What would you like to order? And the answer is, I'd like to order one European Super League, please. Okay, all right. So let's run through those questions now and see what the answers look like. We're going to have one of those. Is it worth it? Well, now that's interesting because we didn't actually ask that question before. Assumedly, it is worth it if we want a flat white. We're back to our European Super League option. Is it worth it? Someone's going to have done a financial analysis, and that will come down to numbers. Someone's going to have done a regulatory analysis for the DCMS here in the UK, Department of Culture, Media and Sport. There will be a minister looking at that, or is there? Have they mapped all their stakeholders and all the rest of it? So is it worth it? What do you need to do to win? What stakeholders do you need to be on side? What's the funding model? Is it all available? Do we need to go to the markets to capitalize the model? What do we need? All those moving parts, and that's why people get paid a lot of money, because there's a lot of moving parts to manage. Who needs to say yes to that? Sponsors, and or they could be detractors. But we need people to say yes to that. So who could say no to that deal and therefore bring that 300-mile-an-hour train to a shuddering halt? They're powerful enough that if they say no, the whole thing comes to a rest, if you like. It comes to a shuddering halt, and the deal is no more. It's toast, unless you can persuade that person to get back on the train, to use that analogy through. Okay, now you might say, well, the chances are very unlikely, and that may be true. But the trouble with risk is that people rationalize. They either go to the risk is 100% and therefore we're not going to do it, or the risk is 0. Whereas risk is much more nuanced, much more subjective and multifaceted than just 1 and 0. So without going there, and on occasion, about a year ago, or perhaps a bit longer, actually thinking about it, the people that the European Super League, I suspect on point of arrogance, had failed to consult with the fans. And it was the fans that said no. And within 36 hours, 9 out of 12 clubs pulled out of the deal because there was reputational harm going to be done to their balance sheets. Again, it all comes down to money at some way, stage, or form. And what if after all that you lose? Well, they had to shelve this deal for a year and a bit before they could bring it back to the table. The toxicity has been lost. The conditions, business conditions, are right in the market, internally, and with our the stakeholder map. The conditions are right that we can come to the table again and talk about this deal. Okay, so we've answered those questions on both the very simple and the complex deal. So let's go again. So assuming what the answer is yes, we are now into a number of main pursuit strategies. You can see 3 up on the screen at the moment. First one is head-to-head. Now you can imagine doing this. It's Napoleon Bonaparte versus the Duke of Wellington. They stand on a battlefield or a business landscape, and they literally go head-to-head to try and win the battle, to try and win the prize from the client. So it's you going up with your arch competitors, who I'm going to assume have a similar array of resources at their disposal, and you're going to go head to head. And you can choose to do that. And by the way, if you don't even think about this and you just pursue a deal, you are by default going head to head with your competition. So the point of this is to do it consciously, actively, by choice, or do something else. You don't just sleepwalk into doing a head-on pursuit deal. Okay, it's expensive because it's your resources versus their resources head to head, and that can be bloody and expensive. Okay, the next thing is, if you are going to win a battle of that, you have to have a significant advantage over that company in order to win. And the answer is almost certainly different for every deal. Every deal has got its, we're talking about big deals here, or strategic deals, something that's not business as usual. You're going to have to think about, what is that? And you're going to need to agree with your other stakeholders that yes, that is the competitive advantage that you have. Okay, now for those of you that have seen my Peaky Blinders pitch analysis, where if you know the Peaky Blinders program, you'll know Tommy Shelby is the gangster, the main character of this program, which is based or centered in the Birmingham in the 1920s. And his one particular scene that's at the end of series 1, he pitches to Billy Kimber, the gangster, and but he doesn't pitch for all of Billy Kimber's business. He pitches just for a part of it, a fraction of it, because if he pitches for all of it, the answer is almost certainly going to be no. If he pitches for just a little bit of it and he makes a success of it and everyone's happy with the deal, they can go on and do all the business maybe next year, something like that. And that's called fractional. That's very smart. So you're not head to head, you are fractional. We're not going to go after all the business. We're just going to go after that bit. And that's called fractional. You're just bidding for just part of a contract. Or it might be fractional because you're going after all of it, but in partnership or consortium with other partners. So, and that you could do that for a number of reasons. It might be on capability. Perhaps you've only got capability in one part of the customer's requirement, but they've got a much broader requirement, and therefore you're going to partner with another company that has got expertise in those other problem areas that the client wants to address. So that can also be a fractional strategy, and that needs dealing with appropriately. Of course, how you deal with that, I'd really like you to come and talk to me about, because I want to help you win more deals. That's why we're doing this. And flanking. Flanking is something where your competition don't even see you coming. You're having discrete conversations with key prospective customers at very senior levels, or at very junior but very influential levels as well. You're doing that from a point of view of trying to get market intelligence, and you're going to form a proposal and put it to that customer, almost certainly without the knowledge of your competition. It's called a flanking strategy. You're going to creep up on surprise and win some business from right under the noses of your competitors. I've done it many times. You may even have done it once or twice, not realizing that actually what you were executing a flanking strategy. It's fantastic. It's not for the faint-hearted, but it can be done, and it's often very lucrative because of the lack of competition. One of the advantages of doing that, of course, is that because it's not a head-to-head, there are less people, less resources required, but you've got to make sure you have political power to follow it through to a successful conclusion. And the other strategy is one where you change the requirement. Maybe the customer wants too much, it's just too broad, and it's not fractional, because what you're doing is you're not just going to take a bit of the business. You're going to persuade the customer, actually, you don't want all of that. All you want is this, and we will do it for you, Mr. Customer, or Mrs. Customer, or Ms. Customer, whatever it happens to be. That is where you're changing the requirement. IBM, past masters of doing this. If they're not changing the actual requirement, they are changing the time scale. So if you can imagine an X and Y axis, you've probably got the X axis as the actual requirement, the Y axis in terms of time, and they're going to slow it right down because they take time to turn bids around. They're going to slow it right down, and it becomes a war of attrition. Small companies can't afford bids to go on too long because it takes too much of their resource, and that plays into a great big vendor like IBM or HP or whoever it happens to be. That plays into their hands. Okay, so by the way, on the screen at the moment you can see NPD. So what is your advantage here in changing the requirement? Is it that you've got a better relationship, or is it that you can develop a new product? If you're slowing things down, you can develop the product in time for when the customer actually wants to award a contract. Okay, brilliant. So, or you can, if a customer wants this much business to award, you can say, well, actually, if we talk to that person's manager, we can persuade them to buy this much, which automatically takes all of these competitors out of the game that couldn't possibly deliver on that. We're going to deliver all of it, and that's risky, but it's incredibly lucrative and rewarding. Okay, we've already talked about decreasing the requirement, and going back to the coffee scenario. So an example of that might be, well, actually, it's really hot outside. We've run out of filter coffee. What about I'll do you a Frappuccino at the same price? And we've got some business from you, you've got a drink in return and probably more appropriate. So that's a way that you can change the requirement in its most basic form. Okay, so getting towards the end of this just now, excuse me, but I would like to invite you, knowing what we've talked about, the risks and issues, knowing that we've talked about what are the relative competitive advantages that you have over your competition in the context of winning the client's support for your bid. Just want you to take a few seconds to reflect on that just now and think about deals, bids that you've got going on in your own pipeline where you could apply this thought process to for strategy. And I just wonder, while you're thinking about that, what your thoughts are. Have you thought about extra contacts that you probably ought to go and tap on the shoulder and meet over a cup of coffee? Just 1 second. My own coffee. That you need to get their support on a particular deal. And I hope I've provoked your thoughts on 1 or 2 of those items. Okay, so no company names, just for your own kind of reference, but it'd be really interesting to find out if anything's come to mind for that. So what are you going to win from that client? What activity or resources are you going to put in place to ensure that you win? What do you need to believe to win, and what do you want the customer to believe in order for you to win? If it's nothing, then you can choose to move on or reflect on this. If there's no thoughts that come to mind, that's what I mean. You can choose to move on, go to the next part of the process, or you can reflect on it a bit more about perhaps I need to put more thought into this. Anyway, we've done enough on reflection. Reflection is a really important part of the pursuit process, because often things will come to mind when you're driving home, when you're in the shower, but not when you're in a client meeting or an internal meeting. So I did promise, didn't get time yesterday to do a big example. But the example I want to talk about, I recognise time is on, but I think we need 2 or 3 more minutes. Real life example of winning a really big deal into over $1 billion, whatever, however many digits that is. But there's 1.3 billion of total contract value with a big telecoms company, and that was the major price. We fractionalized. We didn't want to go for the whole bit. We'd never traded before. We needed to get used to one another, and we went after a smaller data center piece of consultancy, a strategic piece of consultancy. They wouldn't even tell us who our competitors were. And if you're sat there where you've got a deal on the go and your customer won't tell you who your competition is, that it's not a red light, but it's an amber light that, you know, that customer isn't valuing you as much as you might need them to be. So you just need to don't put all your resources into that account until you get more assurance that they're going to support your bid, until you get more intelligence, more information about that kind of deal, what it's going to take to win. So I'm going back a few years, but anyway, there was an opportunity to bid for a smaller piece of business in terms of consultancy. So, you know, I just wonder what approach you would choose. Well, we couldn't really, we'd already had one sort of choice. We didn't want to go after the whole lot. We knew ultimately there was going to be a really big piece of business available. We chose to go head to head on this occasion. Couldn't really do anything else because we didn't know who we were up against. So it was by default a head to head. And the first time we really engaged with them, I impressed them by making, so my needs, let me just go up a bit. My need was to ensure that I had the A team. I didn't just have the next consultant available on the bench, because sometimes it's just not worth bidding unless you can get the A team, the people that have got the battle scars, the people that have just been there, done that, and are going to impress the socks off the client who needs to be assured that you are going to be able to deliver because you've put the right people in front of them. They've got the expertise. Okay, so anyway, I'll leave you to just a minute or so just to read that. Okay, moving on. So lessons learned, personal experience, 30. It's going to be 34 years on the 1st of August. My goodness. Okay, you cannot do it all on your own. You are going to need your personal networks, your LinkedIn, your informal networks within the company, within the client, within other stakeholders, depending on what the deal are. You're going to need their support. And it's not always, in terms of the client, it's not always the most senior people that are making a decision, particularly when it comes to technology. That subject matter expertise often occurs lower down in the organizational structure, where they're more focused on individual technologies than they are on managing a large team. So influential further up for sure, but I've been caught by this at least once at a big US investment bank. Someone I'd failed to, a guy called Stephen, who we're connected with at the minute, and he was the person to go to for a particular technology. It was in the area of video, and I'd failed to identify his expertise, and more for me, I didn't get his support, and therefore I didn't get the deal. There you go. Now with Vodafone, which is the deal I was talking about previously, over $1 billion, there were 280 people involved in that deal, about half with the client in various countries throughout the world, and about half in terms of resources in my own company, finance, delivery, project management. All of those things come to bear when you're doing deals at that level. Okay, so the takeaways in terms of sales pursuits, I'm just wrapping up now. Have you got an executive sponsor in order to unlock those resources as and when you need them, and maybe even extra sort of influencing in the customer's stakeholder group? Is it worth it, the size of the prize? Have you, you're going to do loads of work for a minimal return or loads of work for a massive return? You've just got to know what the answer to that question is. If you're going head to head, it's going to be expensive. Have you got a bid budget? And what are the constraints of that bid budget? Are you going to pursue it, be able to pursue it to a sufficient level of rigor that you need to with the budget that's been allocated to you? Why are you bidding? Why are you going to win? These are all difficult questions to be asked, to be on the receiving end of, but they're very important that you need to know the answers to those questions. And is there any bragging rights around the win, around that customer logo, etc.? What do you need to do to win? Have you personally got what it takes to win that deal, to bring home the bacon, as we used to call it? Or do you need a coach? Do you need a mentor? And that could even be your own manager. Sometimes it will reside outside of the company, someone you can go to that's going to be solely on your side and on the side of winning the deal. There's no political ramifications or anything like that. You can talk to in safety. That might be what you need. And if you do need that, you'll need to speak to your manager as needing extra support. Again, how would you manage your manager's expectations? On that deal I talked to you about earlier on, I had to tell my manager I was going to work on this exclusively, and that's what it needs. That's what I needed to believe. And I wasn't going to be closing any business this year because it was a deal that was going to be happening next year. So my manager needed to be persuaded that he could make his target with me not recording any business this year, and he was successful in that, and therefore he could support me in taking the view that I'd taken to pursue this deal. Okay, right, moving on. So who needs to say yes? Your champions, your sponsors, if you like, or and who could say no? Who's a detractor? And how do you identify them? And the truth about hope, and here's the tough love around hope. Hope is not a strategy unless you can clearly articulate why the customer is going to choose you. Then all the rest of it is hope, and that is not a recipe for success, and it's certainly not a strategy. So now listen, we can't answer any questions, but I'd be interested in your feedback on this. Are there any other specific sales related subjects that you'd like to know more about? I'm not going to put any words in your mouth, but I could probably talk about most things. And if there's something, I'd be really challenged if you could find something I haven't come across before, and I'll certainly go away and research it. But I thank you for watching up until now. Okay, right, we've already been through all of this already, so now thank you for your time and attention. I want to bring to your attention, excuse me, on the screen just now is how to negotiate and win. Let's come off of how to negotiate and close to win the kinds of deals that you want to deal. It's number 6 out of 7 in the masterclass series, and we're going to be doing a whistle stop tour as we have done this time for Pursuits. I'm really looking forward to it. Again, it's one of my favorite parts. Negotiation is really awesome. So I'm really hoping we can see you next week, 1:15 Tuesday afternoon, 1:15 UK time. Thanks for watching thus far. And you can get hold of me through LinkedIn. You can DM me, connect if we're not already connected, through YouTube on the Sales Marvel channel. You can write to me, keith@salesmarvel.co.uk, and you're very welcome to subscribe to the Sales Marvel website, and you'll find loads more sales hints and LinkedIn tips. So until next week, 1:15 on Tuesday afternoon, I look forward to seeing you there, but thank you for watching until now, and I'll bid you a fantastic rest of the day, fantastic rest of week. Thanks very much.